So we've had a chat about what is neurodiversity. We've looked at some of the statistics and kind of the business case as to why we need to talk about neurodiversity in our workplaces. But let's move on now and let's think about what are the current employment challenges that we are seeing in industry right now. Andy, what are you seeing in terms of those employment challenges in the various organizations and industries that you've worked in and are engaging with now?
So the world in which we live is becoming ever more tech driven. Before we get to that, more generally, one of the 5 challenges that the Scale Up Institute is consistently talking about is access to talent. So thinking about how do you find the right employee or the right employee to be able to join the workforce is an area of business that's constantly being reviewed. And with the work environment becoming significantly more tech driven, then actually finding people who can engage into the tech world in a really meaningful way is something that a few of the businesses that I'm working with are finding problematic. There are a couple that are, I don't think they've quite got it right yet in terms of what it is you were talking about earlier, the recruitment process, because sticking a standard advert out there will get standard neurotypical people.
Yes.
Whereas actually, if there is a technical role that actually would benefit from having somebody who thinks differently and engages with that sort of whole technical logic much more readily, then need to be able to embrace being sticking adverts out there and job profiles out there that encourages people to engage. Because at the moment, I don't necessarily think that is something that is widely done.
Yeah, and it might mean that we have to go to different places and venues to find that talent.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I set up Inclusive Change at Work, and actually the seed that it came from, was working with a team way back in kind of 2018, 2017. And we wanted to develop a way of creating a talent development network. We wanted a pathway for divergent talent to be able to develop into different roles in construction, in cyber. And the small companies, for instance, can't compete with the big consultants in big companies. But could they compete on, actually, we could nurture this talent from a very young age. And by young age, I mean sort of from 14 years old.
Right. Okay.
To come into our industry with things like apprenticeships and different routes. And it's kind of why we were all set up. Going to different venues or going to find neurodivergent talent, you're going to have to look in different places. You're going to have to promote to them in different ways, and you're going to have to really show them that, yes, we are neurodivergent friendly. Please come and talk to us, because many won't apply in the first place because they feel that they have to disclose and don't feel safe enough to disclose their neurodivergence at that particular time. I think almost every industry that I've worked with in the past few years, there is a recruitment challenge. It costs more to recruit, so therefore you want to retain people. We had the Great Resignation shortly after COVID. And I think in terms of thinking about Generation Z and the future workforce coming forward, we really, really have to think about what their expectations are in the workplace and how we are going to get them in, keep them, and nurture them to become the future CEOs.
Yeah. I think there is on the other flip side of that, a different perspective from that. I think there is a lack of expertise in being able to effectively manage people as well. People that, the example I gave earlier in terms of, the guy who had grown up in a business and was sort of found himself in a difficult situation, so his mental health suffered. They, as an organization, didn't necessarily have any formal training, but at least they were savvy enough to say, well, let's talk about this. Let's work it out. The individual did get a diagnosis for his condition. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
And so they were able to, develop their understanding off the back of that. But if they've had more established processes and a heightened level of awareness, it might not necessarily have gotten to that point in the first place.
Yeah, quite possibly. I think one of the other big challenges is mental health and well-being in the workplace. I think people are very much more aware of how they feel, and it is important in terms of health and safety, keeping our workplace safe and keeping people and looking after our mental health. And if we aren't, then we are putting ourselves at risk. We are going to lose staff because they will choose to leave because they cannot and won't be able to stay in those conditions. But I think understanding that maybe undiagnosed or unmet needs or late diagnosis around autism, ADHD in particular, can significantly affect your mental health. And it may be that if we're seeing mental health issues in a workplace in general, well, maybe let's look at this through that lens and see whether or not that's part of the challenge. So there's a whole lot that we could talk about, and I think we could probably do another hour session just talking about employment challenges.